The room was silent, save for the occasional rustling of papers. Marigold Mari. Davis sat stiffly in the plush leather chair, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The air felt heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that seemed to settle deeper with every passing second. It was supposed to be a moment of closure, an end to the long and difficult journey of caring for her beloved husband, Nathaniel. But instead, it was a beginning, a painful, unrelenting unraveling. Sierra, Mari's daughter-in-law, sat across from her, the expression on her face as cold and detached as the marble countertops that lined the room. With a sharp, deliberate voice, Sierra began reading the will, her eyes barely flickering as she glanced at Mari. And as for Marigold Davis, my beloved wife, her name has been omitted from this estate. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mari's heart stopped for a moment, the blood draining from her face as the reality sank in. Omitted. Her. The woman who had stood by Nathaniel's side for years, the one who had cared for him when he couldn't walk, the one who had shared his joys and sorrows. Forgotten. Erased. A cold wave of shock washed over her, followed by a thick fog of confusion. Her mind scrambled, desperate to grasp the logic, to make sense of this gut-wrenching turn of events. But no answers came, only the suffocating feeling of abandonment, of being left behind, discarded. The isolation wrapped around her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She wanted to speak, to ask why, to scream at the injustice of it all. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she sat there frozen, her gaze fixed on the table in front of her. The trembling of her hands, the only sign of the storm brewing inside her. Then, the sound of the lawyer's laughter broke through the suffocating silence. It was quick, almost imperceptible at first, as if he had realized something funny. His lips curled into a brief smile, a strange, almost unsettling twitch. The sound didn't match the moment, didn't belong in this room filled with so much raw emotion and pain. It was a brief, odd slip, like an inside joke that only he understood. But something about it felt off. Mari's brow furrowed, a knot forming in her stomach. As she looked up at the lawyer, his face quickly returned to a neutral expression. But the flicker of amusement lingered for just a moment too long. It was subtle, too subtle, but in that moment, Mari felt it. A premonition, a shadow of something deeper she couldn't yet see. There was more to this will, more to Nathaniel's death. And this laughter, it was a signal, a warning. The world around her seemed to blur as the room remained suspended in time, the truth inching closer, but just out of reach. What had Nathaniel hidden from her? What had she failed to see? The questions, like the weight on her chest, piled higher. And as Mari sat there, alone with her thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that the unraveling had only just begun. The funeral was over, but the weight of it lingered, pressing down on Mari's chest as she stepped outside into the cold, quiet garden. The air was sharp, biting at her skin as if it too was mourning. The heavy scent of wet earth mixed with the faint trace of flowers. But all she could smell was the suffocating absence of Nathaniel. The ceremony had been a blur. Distant faces, murmured condolences, the hollow sound of a priest's voice that felt like it belonged to someone else's grief. There was no warmth, no comfort, just a procession of people who came, paid their respects, and then left as quickly as they had arrived. The cups of untouched coffee, the folding chairs hastily gathered in corners, the scattered pamphlets, all of it felt like a facade. A fleeting moment of care that evaporated as soon as the doors closed. Now, in the aftermath, the house seemed emptier than ever. The once vibrant walls, filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold, impersonal. She walked through the rooms like a ghost, her steps echoing on the hardwood floors. But the house, her home, felt more like a stranger's. The rooms, once filled with memories of her and Nathaniel, now stood barren, as if they, too, had been abandoned. She stepped into the garden, hoping for a moment of peace, but the loneliness only deepened. The grass beneath her feet was damp, the faint hum of insects buzzing in the background, but nothing seemed to connect. Not the flowers, not the air, not the house. It was as if the world had moved on, leaving her behind. She stood there, alone, the weight of the silence pressing down on her. Her breath came out in small puffs, visible against the cool air, but there was no one to see it. No one to share this moment of solitude with her. As she looked back at the house, the realization hit her with an almost physical force. She had been left out, not just by Sierra, but by everyone. They had all moved on, just as quickly as they had come. There was no place for her here anymore. The house, once filled with Nathaniel's warmth, now felt cold and empty, a mausoleum to a life that no longer existed. She wasn't just grieving the loss of her husband. She was grieving the loss of her place in this world. She was invisible, a shadow walking through the ruins of her own life. The people around her, friends, family, hadn't really seen her. They hadn't seen the sacrifices, the love, the years she had spent by Nathaniel's side. They hadn't seen her at all. The realization was sharp, cutting through the numbness she had tried to hold on to. She had been erased. The funeral wasn't just the end of her marriage. It was the end of her role, her purpose. Everything she had known for years had slipped away in an instant. Mari stood there, watching the wind push the leaves across the garden, her heart heavy, her thoughts swirling. The coldness of the situation, the coldness of being left behind, seeped into her bones. This wasn't just about losing Nathaniel. It was about losing everything she had ever known. The house felt smaller now, as though the walls were closing in with every step she took. Mari wandered through the empty halls, her mind racing, but it was the coldness of Sierra's presence that stilled her movements. Sierra was everywhere, moving through the house with an effortless command, taking over rooms that had once belonged to her and Nathaniel. She swept through the kitchen, the living room, the study, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as if marking her territory. Yet despite being in the same space, Sierra never looked in her direction, not once. Mari stood in the doorway of the study, watching Sierra from a distance. Sierra's back was turned, but it didn't matter. The absence of acknowledgement, the lack of a single glance in her direction, cut deeper than any words ever could. It was as though she wasn't even there. She was invisible, her presence unimportant, erased from the house, from Nathaniel's life, from everything she had once known. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Mari's heart tightened as she stood rooted to the spot, unable to tear her gaze away from Sierra's calculated movements. She could hear the faint rustling of papers as Sierra rifled through Nathaniel's things, her fingers brushing over the items with a familiarity that made Mari's skin crawl. This was Nathaniel's study, their study, where they had spent countless hours together, working, talking, planning for the future. But now it felt like an alien space, a place where Mari had no claim, no part. She turned her attention to the desk, where Nathaniel's things still lay undisturbed. Her eyes landed on a small silver tie clip tucked neatly beside a stack of papers. It was the one he had always worn to business meetings, the one he had given her as a gift on their anniversary years ago. It had always symbolized their connection, their shared life together. A simple yet intimate token of love, a small gesture, but one that had always carried so much weight. Mari walked over to the desk, her fingers hovering over the tie clip. She picked it up, running it between her fingers as memories of Nathaniel flooded her mind. She could almost hear his voice, see the way his eyes would light up when he spoke of their future. But now, holding the tie clip in her palm, it felt like a distant memory, a part of her past that was slipping away, like sand through her fingers. The tie clip wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a symbol of everything that had been taken from her. She had held on to it as a sign of her place in Nathaniel's life, a place that now felt precarious, fragile. The absence of his presence in the house was a loud, unrelenting echo, but it was Sierra's quiet dominance that truly unsettled her. Sierra, in her effortless control, seemed to claim everything that had once belonged to Marie. The house, the memories, Nathaniel's legacy, it all seemed to be slipping through her hands. Even the smallest of gestures, like the silver tie clip, now felt impersonal. Nathaniel had left it for her, but it was no longer hers to claim. She had been replaced, forgotten. A bitter realization settled deep within Mari's chest. The tie clip wasn't just a symbol of love, It was a relic of a time when she mattered. A time when she had been the center of Nathaniel's world. Now it was a cold reminder that she had been erased, replaced by Sierra. Her place in this house, in Nathaniel's life, had been stolen without a single word, without a single acknowledgement. Mari's fingers tightened around the tie clip, but the cold metal seemed to mock her, to remind her of everything she had lost. She stood there, the weight of the moment pressing down on her, knowing deep down that this wasn't just about a piece of jewelry. It was about a life, a love, and a connection that had been slowly and deliberately stripped away. And with every passing moment, the more she realized that she was no longer part of this world. Mari stepped into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, and the air seemed to thicken around her. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting a sterile glow on the polished table where the attorneys, accountants, and trustees sat like cold, impassive figures. The room smelled faintly of paper and expensive coffee, the kind of atmosphere that felt more suited to a corporate takeover than the management of a family's estate. She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here. She had never been comfortable in these spaces, these rooms filled with sharp suits and clipped tones, where personal matters became business transactions. Nathaniel had always been her anchor in these moments, the one who could navigate the cold professionalism of this world with ease. But now he was gone, and it felt as though the very essence of her presence in this room had been wiped away. Sierra was already seated at the head of the table, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The sight of her there, so at ease, made Mari's stomach churn. Where was the woman who had shared Nathaniel's life with her? Where was the sense of family, of connection? All that remained was Sierra, taking charge, commanding the space as if it had always been hers. Mari sat down at the far end of the table, the chair feeling foreign beneath her. She couldn't help but feel the growing distance between herself and everyone else in the room. No one acknowledged her presence. No one looked her way. It was as if she were invisible, an outsider in a meeting about her own life, about the future of everything she had built with Nathaniel. The lawyers spoke in their practiced, mechanical tones discussing details of the estate, the distribution of assets, the legal obligations. But Mari couldn't focus on their words. She couldn't stop watching Sierra as she spoke, her voice smooth and confident, like someone who had always belonged here. Mari's heart raced, but she remained silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the coldness of the situation seeping into her bones. As Sierra continued to dominate the conversation, there was a shift, a subtle moment that made Mari's breath catch in her throat. Sierra's words blurred together, but one sentence stood out, freezing Mari in place. "The family trust," Sierra began, her voice a little too steady, "which Nathaniel and Marigold Davis managed together, has now been officially transferred to my name." Mari's eyes snapped to Sierra's face, disbelief flooding her body like ice water. Transferred to her name? It didn't make sense. She had been by Nathaniel's side, working hand in hand with him, managing every aspect of their lives. This trust was theirs. It was a symbol of their shared vision for the future. Nathaniel had entrusted her with it. He had promised that they would manage it together. Always. But now Sierra was claiming it as her own. The room seemed to tilt for a moment as the words echoed in Mari's mind, the weight of them sinking in slowly, painfully. She had been completely blindsided. How had this happened? How had her role, her contribution, been so easily erased, replaced with the cold, calculated control of Sierra? Her mind raced, trying to catch up, but it was like trying to grasp at smoke. The more she thought about it, the more surreal it became. She had given up so much for Nathaniel, for their life together, and now, in this room, she was nothing more than a bystander. The lawyers continued to drone on, talking about documents and signatures and assets, but all Mari could hear was the steady tick of the clock on the wall, counting down the moments that had taken her life, her legacy, away from her. She was no longer a part of this world that had once been hers and Nathaniel's. It was slipping from her grasp, and Sierra was taking it all. Mari felt the sting of betrayal, the sense of isolation growing deeper with every passing second. She was an outsider now, a stranger in a house that no longer felt like home, at a table that no longer had a place for her. The room was cold, the air was thick with disconnection, and the reality was undeniable. Sierra had taken control of everything, her life, her past, her future, and there was nothing Mari could do but sit there, silent, watching it all slip away. The room seemed to tighten around Mari as the meeting dragged on, each word spoken by the lawyers a silent confirmation of her worst fear. The conversation shifted to the distribution of assets, numbers, percentages, properties, all formalized, mechanical, as though it was nothing more than a routine task. And yet, every word felt like a blow. The lawyer shuffled a few papers in front of him, his voice steady as he read from the document. The estate will be divided among the following individuals: Sierra Thornton as the primary beneficiary, Tyler Westbrook and Megan Carter as additional trustees. Mari's stomach clenched. She knew what was coming, but hearing it aloud felt like the floor had suddenly dropped away from under her. She listened, her hands cold in her lap, her throat tight. There was nothing about her. Her name was not mentioned, not once. She had been excluded entirely. The words continued, a blur of legal jargon and detached formalities, but Mari couldn't hear them anymore. All she could focus on was the gaping void where her name should have been. The air around her thickened, each passing second intensifying the growing sense of alienation, of being erased. Heat spread slowly up her spine, the warmth a stark contrast to the coldness of the room. It started in her chest, an ache that moved upward, burning her throat as she fought to hold back the emotions that threatened to spill over. Her body betrayed her, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady herself against the rising tide of disbelief and betrayal. How could this be happening? How had she become so insignificant, so easily dismissed from everything she had helped build, everything she had shared with Nathaniel? Her heart hammered in her chest as the lawyer continued reading, oblivious to the storm that was brewing inside her. Sierra Thornton, executor of the trust. His voice rang in her ears, but his words were distant, detached. She was no longer in the room with them. She was outside of it, looking in from a place that no longer felt like home. Her mind raced back to the years she and Nathaniel had spent building their life together, managing the trust, discussing their future, their plans for the family. She had poured everything into it, every ounce of her energy, every part of herself, and now in one swift motion it had all been swept away. The life they had built, the legacy they had shared, everything was no longer hers. The realization hit her with the force of a sledgehammer, but it wasn't just the will. It wasn't just the estate. It was the silence, the cold, deliberate silence that surrounded her. It was the knowledge that Nathaniel, the man she had loved, the man who had been her partner in every sense of the word, had made this decision without her. He had left her out, with no explanation, no justification. The heat in her chest gave way to a slow, bitter chill, a realization sinking deep into her bones. She had been erased. It wasn't just the trust, it wasn't just the assets, it was her. She had been written out of the narrative of her own life. Mari sat back in her chair, feeling small and insignificant, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The burning sensation at the back of her neck was no longer just physical. It was the anger that simmered beneath the surface, the anger at herself for not seeing it coming, for trusting that everything would stay the same. The anger at Nathaniel, for leaving her in this void, this unknown space, without so much as a word. But beneath the shock and the sting of betrayal, something else began to take root, a quiet, growing determination. She couldn't let this stand. She couldn't allow her place in this story, in Nathaniel's life, to be erased so easily. She needed to know why. Mari stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor, her legs unsteady but firm beneath her. The room seemed to hold its breath as she turned and walked toward the door. She couldn't stay here any longer, surrounded by people who saw her as a ghost, a mere observer in the life she had once shared with Nathaniel. She had to find the truth. She had to know what had happened to Nathaniel's will, to their life together. The answers were out there, hidden beneath layers of silence and deceit. And no matter what it took, Mari was going to uncover them. The meeting continued behind her, but she didn't hear it. She had already made her decision. The investigation was about to begin. Mari's hands were still trembling as she walked through the empty halls of the house, the silence echoing in her ears like a constant reminder of everything that had been taken from her. The sting of the estate meeting was still fresh, and the emptiness of the house felt heavier than ever. She couldn't breathe here, not with the weight of the betrayal crushing her chest. But she had to keep moving. Her mind kept drifting back to the trust, to the way Sierra had so smoothly taken control, as if she had always been meant to have it. But deep down, Mari knew there was more to the story. Something wasn't right. She couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel had hidden something from her. Maybe he hadn't intended for her to be cut out of his life so completely. Maybe there was more to this than just a will and a cold final decision. She went to his study again, the place where everything had once felt safe. She hadn't been able to face it until now. The familiar scent of leather and paper filled the air as she stepped inside. The desk was as she remembered, cluttered with papers, a half-empty coffee cup beside it, his favorite pen still lying beside an open notebook. As she scanned the desk, her gaze fell on a small, folded piece of paper wedged between two legal documents. It was an odd place for anything to be, especially in Nathaniel's meticulously organized space. Her heart raced as she reached for it, fingers trembling as she unfolded the paper. It was in Nathaniel's handwriting, a familiar, comforting script that she hadn't seen in far too long. Sierra's changes, doubts lingering. I don't know if this is what I really want. My heart aches, thinking about leaving Marigold out. I know she's always been there. This trust, it was supposed to be ours. Mari's breath caught in her throat as she read the words. Her eyes blurred, the ink on the paper becoming a haze of sorrow and confusion. This wasn't just a note. It was a confession. Nathaniel had known something was wrong. He had questioned the changes Sierra had made. He had doubts, real doubts about the will, and yet somehow he had still allowed it to happen. The pain of it was overwhelming. It wasn't just the shock of being left out. It was the realization that Nathaniel had known. He had seen the manipulation, felt the distance growing, and still he had allowed it. His heart had ached and so had hers. But he hadn't stopped it. Instead, he had written these words in secret, unsure of how to stop what had already begun. Tears welled up in Mari's eyes as she clutched the paper tightly in her hands. How could he have left me like this? She thought, feeling the sharp sting of abandonment once again. But even through the sorrow, there was something else, something more pressing, something that burned like a fire within her. I need to know the truth. I need to understand what happened. Her chest tightened with grief, but alongside it, a spark of determination flickered. This note, it wasn't just a memory of Nathaniel's regrets. It was evidence, proof that he hadn't agreed to this, proof that something had gone wrong, that Sierra's hold over him had manipulated him to the point where he had erased her from everything they had built. Mari wiped her eyes, the decision forming clearly in her mind. She couldn't let this stand. She couldn't let Sierra get away with this. Nathaniel may have left her behind, but his words, his doubts, had given her the chance to fight for what was rightfully hers. She would find the rest of the truth, no matter how deep she had to dig. Her heart was torn between the grief of losing Nathaniel and the rising need for justice. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the life they had shared, for the love that had been twisted into something unrecognizable. She couldn't let Sierra take it all away without a fight. Mari folded the note carefully and tucked it into her pocket. The decision was made. She would search, she would dig, she would uncover every shred of evidence. This was far from over, and she wasn't going to let anyone erase her from Nathaniel's story, not without a fight. Her mind raced as she moved toward the door, her body filled with the same determination she had once shared with Nathaniel. This wasn't just about grief anymore. This was about justice, and she would stop at nothing to get it. The house had never felt so quiet, so oppressive. Every room, every hallway seemed to watch her, each step a reminder of everything she had lost, everything that had been taken. But Mari couldn't afford to linger in her grief. The discovery of Nathaniel's handwritten note had ignited something deep inside her, a burning need to uncover the truth, to piece together the fractured remnants of their life. She made her way to the study again, her footsteps echoing through the empty house. She felt as though she was searching for something more than just paperwork. She was searching for answers, for justice, for a way to restore what had been so casually stolen from her. Her fingers brushed against the worn edge of the desk as she opened the drawers, one by one, sifting through the clutter of old files and business contracts. She hadn't expected to find much. Nathaniel had been meticulous, almost obsessively organized. But as she rifled through the papers, a strange sense of urgency overtook her. She couldn't stop now. The cluttered drawer gave up little at first, just a jumble of old receipts and documents from years past. But then, at the very back, something caught her eye. A folded document, its edges yellowed with age, almost hidden beneath a stack of investment papers. She reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded it. The paper was thick, the handwriting unmistakably Nathaniel's. Her heart skipped a beat. It was an addendum to the trust, an unsigned one tucked away in the farthest corner of his life. She had never seen it before. Mari's breath hitched as she began to read the words. They were clear, deliberate, and haunting. I have concerns. There are changes to the will I don't agree with. Sierra's influence is growing too strong. She is pushing for control where none is hers. I fear this is not what I would have chosen. I cannot change it without risking more conflict, but I will leave a record of my doubts here, in case there are those who can right this wrong after I am gone. Mari's hands shook as she reread the words. Sierra's influence, Nathaniel had known. He had seen what was happening, had felt the weight of Sierra's control growing stronger. And yet he had left it this way, unsigned, unaddressed. He had left her, left them, vulnerable. A rush of conflicting emotions flooded over Mari. Anger surged first, sharp and bitter. How could Nathaniel have known and done nothing? Why hadn't he fought harder? Hadn't he seen how deep Sierra's manipulation went? He had seen it, felt it, but had done nothing to stop it. But then the sadness washed over her, deeper than before. He knew. He had known all along and had still made the choice to remain silent. Perhaps it had been fear. Fear of confronting Sierra, of losing control, of losing his family. Or maybe it had been something else entirely, something Mari couldn't quite understand. The complexity of it all made her heart ache in ways she couldn't put into words. And yet, in the midst of her sadness and anger, something else was stirring inside her. A growing resolve. Nathaniel's doubts, his fears, had been left for her to find. She couldn't ignore them. She couldn't let this go unchallenged. She had to protect Nathaniel's legacy, not just for herself, but for the life they had built together, for the promises they had made. This wasn't just about money or control. This was about something deeper, about preserving the life and love they had shared, the integrity of their work, and the vision they had for the future. Sierra had taken too much. She had manipulated too much. And now, Mari had the power to fight back, to put things right. With a deep breath, Mari carefully folded the addendum and tucked it into her pocket. She wasn't done yet. There were more questions to answer, more pieces of the puzzle to uncover. But this discovery, the weight of Nathaniel's doubts, had strengthened her resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Nathaniel, for their history, and for the truth. As she walked away from the study, the papers scattered across the desk seemed less like clutter and more like pieces of a story she was now determined to finish. She would find every document, every letter, every piece of evidence that would show what had truly happened, and she would make sure the truth came to light. No more silence. No more being erased. Mari was ready. Mari sat at the kitchen table, the pages of the unsigned trust addendum spread out in front of her. She could feel the weight of the discovery, the quiet power it gave her, but it was also heavy with the uncertainty of what came next. Every line of Nathaniel's handwriting felt like a message from the past, a plea for something she still couldn't quite understand. She had always been the one to handle the personal matters, to manage their lives, while Nathaniel dealt with the world beyond. Now, she found herself at the center of something that had spiraled beyond her control. She needed help. There was only one person she could turn to. Jamie Cross. Nathaniel had always trusted him, and Mari had come to rely on him over the years as well. Jamie was the kind of man who never showed his cards, who remained calm no matter the storm. In the chaos of everything she had lost, Jameson was the one person she knew would take this seriously. His professional, no-nonsense approach might be exactly what she needed to cut through the fog of confusion. She dialed his number, the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. It rang once, then twice, before the familiar, calm voice on the other end answered. "Mari?" Jameson's voice was steady, but there was an underlying concern. "What's going on?" I need your help," Mari said, her voice coming out in a rush. "It's about Nathaniel's will. There's something I found. I don't know who else to turn to." There was a brief pause on the other end. Jameson always had a way of sensing the gravity of a situation without needing all the details up front. "I'll be over in an hour. Stay where you are. We'll go through this together." True to his word, Jameson arrived promptly. His presence was a steadying force as soon as he entered the room. His broad shoulders, usually so relaxed, seemed taut with the awareness of how serious this was. He didn't say much at first, just greeted her with a quiet nod and then turned to the table where the papers lay. Mari could feel her heart racing in her chest, but Jameson didn't flinch. He sat down, unfolding the trust addendum carefully. His fingers grazed over the paper as if he were handling something fragile, something important. His eyes scanned the document with sharp focus, his expression unreadable. Mari couldn't help but watch him, hoping he would provide some clarity, some answer to the storm of emotions that had been swirling inside her. After a few moments, he set the document down and looked at her. His gaze was steady, calm, but there was something else, something that suggested he understood more than he was letting on. "Looks like Nathaniel had his doubts," Jameson said, his voice measured. "He knew something wasn't right, but he didn't take action. He left these notes, left you the clue." Mari's chest tightened. She had known that Nathaniel had felt something was wrong, but hearing Jameson confirm it made her feel a mix of sorrow and frustration. "He knew," she whispered, the words feeling like a betrayal of their entire life together. "And he didn't do anything." Jameson leaned back, folding his hands in front of him. "It's clear he was conflicted, Mari. Nathaniel wasn't a man who made decisions lightly. But this," he gestured to the papers, "this was a warning. He knew that Sierra's influence was growing too powerful. He left this for you. He knew you would come for the truth." Mari's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "I don't know if I can do this," she said softly, her voice cracking. "It feels like everything is slipping away. Nathaniel, he should have protected me. He should have protected us." Jameson's expression softened, though he remained composed. "Mari," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "You're not alone in this. You're not fighting this battle by yourself. We'll get through it, but you need to stay focused. You need to be strong. For Nathaniel, for the life you both built." Mari met his eyes, the weight of his words grounding her. The sadness was still there, pressing against her chest, but now there was something else, something stronger. A sense of purpose, a determination. Jameson wasn't just offering her sympathy. He was offering her solidarity, a partnership in this fight. They weren't just going to sit back and let Sierra control everything. They were going to dig deeper, find the truth, and expose the lies. "Thank you, Jamie," Mari said, her voice steadying as she wiped away the last of her tears. "I don't know what I would do without you." Jameson gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We'll figure this out together. You've always had more strength than you give yourself credit for, Mari. And now, we're going to make sure Nathaniel's legacy isn't erased. We'll find the truth." Mari nodded, a slow sense of resolve settling within her. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There were more documents to find, more pieces to uncover. But with Jameson by her side, she felt like she had a chance. For the first time since Nathaniel's death, she no longer felt completely alone. Together, they would expose Sierra's manipulation, and they would reclaim what was rightfully hers. The investigation was just beginning. Mari sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tapping absently on the edge of her coffee mug. The house was quiet, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the background. It had been days since she'd discovered the handwritten note from Nathaniel, and the weight of it still lingered heavily in her mind. She had spent every waking hour going through the trust documents, speaking with Jameson, trying to piece together the truth, but it felt like she was grasping at smoke. Every time she thought she had a lead, it slipped away. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts, and she glanced at the screen. It was an email notification. Her heart sank when she saw the sender, Chloe Bennett, assistant to Sierra Thornton. Mari's stomach twisted. She had been dreading this moment, the inevitable communication from Sierra's camp, but she hadn't expected it to come so coldly. She opened the email with a sense of resignation, knowing exactly what it would contain, but still unprepared for the sharp sting of it. Subject: Update on the estate distribution. Dear Mrs. Davis, I hope this email finds you well. As per Sierra Thornton's instructions, the process for the distribution of Nathaniel Dawson's estate is now complete. Please note that all assets have been finalized and the final documents have been signed. If you require further clarification or have any concerns, feel free to reach out. Best regards, Chloe Bennett. The words on the screen blurred as Mari's vision clouded with tears. She blinked rapidly, but the sting of abandonment cut through her. The process is now complete. All assets have been finalized. The finality of the words hit her like a physical blow. It was done. Nathaniel's estate, their estate, had been parceled out without so much as a personal note. A single word of recognition, or a shred of empathy for what Mari had lost. The email, so crisp, so impersonal, felt like a final dismissal. No explanation, no apologies, just a cold confirmation that she had no place in the life she had shared with Nathaniel. It was as though her years of devotion had been erased in one impersonal line of text. She leaned back in her chair, the weight of isolation pressing down on her chest. This was it. This was how Sierra had decided to handle it, by erasing Mari, by reducing her to an afterthought. It was as though the years they had spent together didn't matter, as though the bond they had built had been nothing more than a fleeting moment in Nathaniel's life. The email was a slap in the face, a stark reminder of how little her presence mattered in the grand scheme of things. Mari's hands tightened around the phone, her nails digging into her palms. The urge to throw it across the room was overwhelming, but she stayed still, her breath coming in shallow bursts. How had it come to this? How had she become so insignificant to Sierra, to everyone? She had given everything to Nathaniel, to their marriage, to the life they had built. And now, it felt like it had all been swept away by someone who had never truly understood her, never truly respected her place in Nathaniel's life. The weight of the betrayal was suffocating. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to confront Sierra and demand answers. But instead, she sat there, staring at the email, the harshness of it gnawing at her insides. She thought of Nathaniel's handwritten note again, the one that had given her the faintest glimmer of hope. He had known something was wrong. He had recognized Sierra's growing control, but he had been too late to stop it. And now, it was up to Mari to finish what he had started, to uncover the truth and fight for what had been taken from them both. Mari took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. She couldn't let this stand. She couldn't let Sierra get away with this. The email was the final push she needed. She had been living in the shadow of Nathaniel's death for too long, but now it was time to step into the light. It was time to confront Sierra, to challenge the actions that had left her out in the cold. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, and for a moment, she considered responding to the email. But then she paused, realizing that there was nothing more to say in words. The only way to take action now was to gather what she needed, to continue the investigation, and to make Sierra face the consequences of her actions. With a deep breath, Mari deleted the email, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't need closure from Sierra, not now. She needed to find the truth, to expose the lies, and to reclaim what was rightfully hers. She stood up, her body steadying as the determination grew inside her. The emotional toll had been heavy, but now there was no turning back. The investigation wasn't just about assets or documents. It was about her, about Nathaniel, about their life. And this time Mari wasn't going to let anyone erase her. She was going to make sure the truth was known, no matter what it took. Sierra's email had been a trigger. But it had also given Mari the clarity she needed. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The office was small but modern, the walls lined with bookshelves stacked high with legal texts. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, and the soft hum of a distant printer added a sense of quiet productivity. It was the kind of place where business was handled with precision, professional, focused. A sharp contrast to the whirlwind of emotions Mari had been carrying since Nathaniel's death. She felt out of place here, as though her grief was too messy, too raw for a setting that demanded such clean, calculated logic. Jameson sat beside her in the sleek, black chairs, his calm presence a grounding force. He hadn't said much on the way here, but Mari knew he was just as invested in this as she was. They were both here for the same reason, to take the next step, to move forward in their pursuit of the truth, to reclaim what had been stolen. The door to the office opened, and a woman stepped in. Isabel "Izzy" Parker, a woman who radiated confidence and competence in every step she took. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, immediately assessed the room as she entered. She was dressed in a simple black suit, professional and commanding, but there was an unmistakable warmth in her demeanor that Mari couldn't help but appreciate. Isabel's gaze flicked to Mari, then to Jameson, before she extended a hand, her grip firm but not overbearing. "Mari," she said, her voice smooth and assured. "Jameson, it's good to meet you both. Let's get down to business." Mari nodded, feeling a flutter of nerves in her chest. She had been through so much already, discovering the unsigned addendum, feeling the sting of rejection in Sierra's impersonal email, and now she was about to dive deeper into the legal maze that had become her life. But Isabel's presence was different from the cold, detached demeanor of the attorneys at the estate meeting. There was an energy about her, an assurance that gave Mari a flicker of hope. They sat around a small conference table, the papers Jameson and Mari had gathered spread out before them. Isabel's eyes scanned the documents quickly, her focus unwavering as she flipped through each one with practiced ease. Mari felt the weight of it all, the years of work, the trust, the doubts. But Isabel didn't pause to linger on the emotional impact of it. She was here to look at the facts, to find what could be used, to build a case. "All right," Isabel said, placing the last document down with a sharp exhale. She looked at Marie, her expression neutral but not unkind. "I've reviewed the documents, and there are clear inconsistencies in the way things have been handled, specifically with the will and the trust addendum." Mari felt her chest tighten at Isabel's words. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but hearing it from someone so clearly experienced in probate law made it all the more real. There was something wrong. There had been manipulation, Isabel continued, her voice calm but firm. "From what I can see, Nathaniel's trust addendum was never signed, but it was clear he had concerns about Sierra's influence. The final changes to the will appear rushed, and there are several clauses that don't align with previous versions of the document. It looks like Sierra was trying to ensure she had full control, and frankly, the way things have been handled, well, it smells like coercion." Mari's breath caught in her throat. It was one thing to suspect something had gone wrong, but hearing Isabel's confident words confirmed what she had feared. Sierra had been working behind the scenes, manipulating Nathaniel's decisions. She had stolen everything. "But there's more," Isabel continued, her eyes never leaving the documents as she spoke. "I noticed several inconsistencies with how the assets were distributed. There are no clear explanations for why Nathaniel's personal wishes, especially regarding Marigold, were ignored. This wasn't just poor legal handling. This was someone making sure the trust didn't reflect the true intentions of the deceased." Mari's pulse quickened. So it wasn't just the will. It was everything. Nathaniel's legacy, his trust, his wishes, all of it had been twisted by Sierra's hands. Isabel paused, letting her words sink in. Mari could feel the gravity of what they were uncovering, the magnitude of what was at stake. Her heart raced, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something stir inside her that wasn't grief. It was determination. "We can challenge this," Isabel said, looking up from the papers and meeting Mari's gaze directly. "But it won't be easy. We'll need more evidence. We'll need to subpoena some of the financial records. And we'll likely have to call in witnesses, people who can attest to Nathaniel's intentions and the pressure he was under from Sierra. Mari nodded, her mind swirling with the weight of the task ahead. She had been thrust into a battle she never wanted, but now that she was here, now that she had the truth, there was no turning back. For too long she had been passive, caught in a web of confusion and loss. But this was something she could control. "Do you believe we can win?" Mari asked, her voice a little shakier than she had intended. Isabel met her gaze with steady resolve. "I believe we can fight, and I believe the truth is on your side, Mari. It's time to take action." Mari took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Isabel's words settle into her bones. The emotional turmoil, the grief, the betrayal, the isolation was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But now it was tempered by something else, a sense of purpose, a call to action. Isabel had taken charge of the legal proceedings, but she had given Mari something else, something just as important. She had given her the strength to fight back, to reclaim what was lost. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. But with Jameson and Isabel at her side, Mari was ready to confront Sierra and the truth head-on. It was time to take control. It was time to make sure Nathaniel's legacy was protected. And for the first time in a long time, Mari felt like she had a chance to make things right. The days that followed the meeting with Isabel were a blur of paperwork, phone calls and hours spent combing through the remnants of Nathaniel's life. Mari had expected the process to be tedious, but the emotional toll was something she hadn't prepared for. Each document she sifted through, each new email, each old receipt felt like another piece of Nathaniel being pulled further out of her reach. Yet, with every step, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Jameson was a constant presence by her side, his calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the storm of emotions that churned inside her. He kept the wheels of their investigation turning, using his network to gather financial records and speak with people who might have insight into what had happened. But it wasn't just Jameson. Isabel, too, had thrown herself into the case with an unwavering focus. She had called in favors, subpoenaed documents, and reached out to financial institutions, all while maintaining the cool, professional composure that made her an expert in probate litigation. Every day, more evidence surfaced, discrepancies in signatures, financial records that didn't line up, and, most damning of all, communications between Sierra and Nathaniel's lawyer that hinted at coercion, manipulation, and a calculated move to secure everything for herself. But the breakthrough came when Isabel introduced them to Viv Clark, a legal assistant who had worked closely with Nathaniel's lawyer, Frank Hayes. Viv had been present at several key meetings during the final months of Nathaniel's life. She had witnessed firsthand the tension between Nathaniel and Sierra, and she had seen the subtle ways in which Sierra had pushed for control over the estate. The first time Mari met Viv, she was struck by the young woman's quiet demeanor. Viv wasn't the type to seek the spotlight. She was soft-spoken, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. But there was a sharpness to her eyes that suggested she had seen more than she let on. Viv met with Mari, Jameson, and Isabel in a small conference room at Isabel's office. She sat at the table with a nervous energy, clutching a cup of tea in her hands, clearly uncomfortable in the spotlight. But when Isabel asked her about the events leading up to Nathaniel's death, Viv's eyes became steady. "I didn't realize how far things had gone," Viv said softly, glancing at Mari. "But I know I've seen things I shouldn't have. I was in the room when Sierra started pushing for more influence over Nathaniel's decisions. At first, it was small stuff, suggestions about where he should invest his money, what properties he should focus on. But then, it got more personal, more aggressive." Mari's heart thudded in her chest. She had suspected as much, but hearing Viv's words gave them weight, gave them meaning. Sierra had been slowly worming her way into Nathaniel's decisions, undermining his authority, playing on his vulnerabilities. "Can you give us any examples?" Isabel asked, her voice calm but urgent. Viv hesitated, taking a slow sip of her tea before speaking again. "One meeting, I was asked to sit in on a discussion about the family trust. Nathaniel was frustrated. He was arguing with Sierra about the future of the trust. He didn't want to make any more changes without Mari's input. But Sierra kept pressing. She told him in front of me that it was time for change, that Mari wouldn't understand the business side of things. Nathaniel didn't agree with her. You could see it on his face, but he backed down. He signed some paperwork later that day. Mari felt the floor shift beneath her. Nathaniel had fought. He had fought for her, for their life together. But Sierra had pushed harder, manipulated him until he gave in. She had used Nathaniel's vulnerability, his love for her, and twisted it to get what she wanted. Viv continued, her voice quieter now, as though speaking the truth had unleashed something heavy inside her. There were other things. A few phone calls I overheard, Sierra making decisions about assets, about investments, as if she had already taken control. I don't know if Nathaniel was aware of how much she was taking over, but I saw the signs. He was pulling away. He didn't want to fight her anymore. The weight of Viv's testimony settled heavily in the room, and Mari could feel the pieces starting to fit together. Every detail Viv shared, every small, seemingly insignificant moment, painted a picture of manipulation, of coercion. Sierra hadn't just taken control of the estate. She had taken control of Nathaniel's life, his decisions, his legacy. And now, she was trying to erase Mari from the story entirely. Jameson leaned forward, his tone serious. Viv, do you have any documentation, anything that might support what you're saying? A signed email, a meeting record, anything? Viv nodded. I have copies of some emails. They're not the whole story, but they show the direction Sierra was pushing in. I'll get them for you. Mari felt a cold knot in her stomach. This was it, the moment when everything started to come to light. She had always known that Sierra had been manipulating Nathaniel. But hearing the details from someone who had been there, witnessing the subtle shift in power, made the betrayal feel that much more real. Her hands clenched into fists on the table, the anger inside her simmering. Sierra had robbed her of everything, her home, her future, and now even Nathaniel's legacy. But the evidence was mounting. Viv's testimony, the emails, the financial records, it was all coming together. This is just the beginning, Isabel said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. We have a long way to go, but we're getting closer. We're going to expose what happened here, Mari. We're going to make sure Sierra's actions don't go unpunished. Mari nodded, her resolve solidifying with every word. She was no longer just a passive observer in her own life. She was fighting back, not just for herself, but for Nathaniel, for their history, for everything that had been taken from them. The battle had only just begun, and with the evidence they were gathering, they were going to take down Sierra and expose the truth. Mari wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The night was filled with the sound of soft jazz and clinking glasses as guests mingled under the warm glow of chandeliers. It was a charity gala, Sierra's event, and from the outside it looked like everything had been perfectly orchestrated. The luxurious ballroom was a sea of cocktail dresses and tuxedos, every corner filled with high-profile guests eager to support the latest cause Sierra was championing. Her carefully cultivated image as a philanthropist, a woman of influence, was on full display. But for Mari, the glittering facade only deepened the sense of disgust. This wasn't a night for charity. It was a night for Sierra to solidify her control, to show the world that she was not just the new matriarch, but the sole force in control of everything that had once belonged to Mari and Nathaniel. Mari had come tonight with one purpose, to make sure that power didn't go unchallenged. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, calm and deliberate, her every step measured as she made her way to the far side of the room. The weight of the truth, the evidence they had gathered over the past weeks, pressed down on her, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like armor. As she approached the edge of the ballroom, Mari's eyes found Sierra. The woman was surrounded by admirers, laughing, charming, playing the role of the gracious host, her smile as flawless as ever. Her air of control was intoxicating. No one here could imagine the truth about how she had manipulated everything behind closed doors. Mari's stomach twisted as she watched Sierra, but she didn't falter. She had come here for a reason. Tonight, she would confront Sierra's carefully crafted image. Tonight, she would take back control. Marie's phone buzzed in her pocket. A quick glance confirmed it. Viv had sent the emails, the ones that would expose Sierra's manipulation, the ones that would prove her role in twisting Nathaniel's will. The documents, the hidden communications, the financial inconsistencies, everything was ready. Mari didn't rush. She took a deep breath and approached Sierra, her footsteps measured, her mind clear. She was no longer the woman who had been cast aside. She was reclaiming her narrative, her story. Sierra turned at the sound of Mari's approach, her smile faltering only slightly when she saw who was walking toward her. "Mari," Sierra said, her voice a mix of surprise and feigned warmth. "I didn't expect you to attend tonight." "How lovely to see you." Mari smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm sure you didn't." She looked around at the crowd, noting how easily Sierra shifted her attention to them, how effortlessly she played the role of the perfect hostess. But Mari could see the cracks, the subtle tension in Sierra's posture, the tightness around her smile. She knew. "What a wonderful event," Mari said, her voice low, carrying just enough weight for Sierra to feel the shift. "It's almost as if it's meant to show just how much control you've taken over everything." Sierra's eyes narrowed, the smile dropping from her face. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Mari," she said, the icy edge in her tone barely concealed. "This is for a good cause, nothing more." Mari let the silence hang between them for a moment, then said, "You've taken a lot more than what you're willing to admit, Sierra. Nathaniel's trust, his will, everything you've manipulated to suit your own needs. You've pushed me out, erased me without a second thought." The words were sharp, but they were nothing compared to the weight behind them. The room, buzzing with idle chatter, suddenly felt quieter. Guests nearby began to glance over, sensing the shift in the air. Sierra's gaze flickered nervously, but she quickly masked it with a flick of her hair, trying to regain her composure. "You don't know what you're talking about," Sierra said, her voice tight now, betraying her usual confidence. "Nathaniel left his estate to me. It's my responsibility now, and I've handled everything as he wanted." Mari didn't flinch. "If that were true, you wouldn't have been so careful to erase every trace of my name from the documents. And you wouldn't have hidden his true intentions from the people who matter, from me." Her words hit with precision, like each syllable was carefully placed to unravel the illusion Sierra had built. Guests began to take notice, whispering amongst themselves as the truth started to seep into the conversation. Sierra's facade was crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of Mari's calm, controlled revelation. Mari stood tall, no longer the woman on the outside. She was reclaiming her place in this world, her place in Nathaniel's story. As the truth began to spread through the room, she felt the shift in power, no longer held by the woman who had carefully curated her image, but by the one who had lived through the betrayal and had come out on the other side stronger. Sierra's eyes darted around the room, seeing the first signs of doubt in the guests' faces. Her grip on the situation was slipping. She wasn't the queen of this event anymore. She was a woman exposed, and Mari, quietly but powerfully, had taken back the reins. "Tell them, Sierra," Mari said, her voice unwavering. "Tell them about the documents you've hidden. Tell them about the manipulation. You can keep running, or you can face the consequences of your actions. But tonight, the truth is coming out." Sierra's lips trembled, but she quickly regained her composure, her mask slipping back into place. "You're making a scene, Mari," she snapped, but there was no conviction behind the words. Mari didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was already doing its work. The guests were no longer entranced by Sierra's charm, no longer mesmerized by her controlled image. The truth had begun to spread like wildfire, and there was no turning back. As the room hummed with quiet conversations, the shift was palpable. Mari had done it. She had reclaimed her place in this story, and she had exposed the cracks in Sierra's carefully constructed world. For the first time in a long while, Mari felt the weight of justice settling around her shoulders. She wasn't just standing here in Nathaniel's memory. She was standing here in her own right, taking control, and finally, putting an end to the power Sierra had stolen from her. And as the truth began to circulate, Mari knew that this moment was only the beginning. The courtrooms were cold, impersonal spaces, an arena where emotion took a backseat to law. Yet Mari could feel every shred of her emotional turmoil as she sat beside Jameson and Isabel at the long, polished table. Her fingers, cold and clammy, gripped the edge, her knuckles turning white. The documents before her, stacked neatly in piles, felt more like weighty burdens than instruments of justice. They were pieces of Nathaniel's legacy, pieces of her life, and now they were being dissected in front of her by strangers in a cold, sterile environment where the heartache she carried would be reduced to legal jargon. The legal challenge had begun, and every step felt like a battle, not just for justice, but for her very identity. Jameson had helped gather the evidence, witness testimonies, financial records, emails from Vivian, and the unsigned trust addendum. Isabel, with her calm and methodical approach, had formulated their argument, piecing together the inconsistencies in the will, the signs of manipulation, and the clear breach of Nathaniel's intentions. But as the weeks passed, Mari found herself caught between two conflicting forces: her desire for revenge, to see Sierra held accountable for what she had done, and her need for closure, to find peace and move forward. It was a fine line, and she wasn't sure which side she was walking on anymore. Sitting in the courtroom for the first time, Mari realized that this was more than just about the will. This was about everything she had lost: her life, her place in Nathaniel's world, the family she had built, the future they had planned. She had poured her heart and soul into her marriage, into their shared dreams, and now it felt as if that had all been ripped away, leaving her empty, hollow. Was this legal battle just the pursuit of justice, or was it something more? A final attempt to hold on to what had been taken. "Are you all right?" Jameson's voice broke through her thoughts, his gaze steady and concerned as he leaned in slightly. Mari met his eyes, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just trying to focus." She paused, then added, "This is harder than I thought." Jameson nodded, understanding without needing an explanation. "It's okay to feel conflicted. This isn't just a legal case, it's about your life, your history. But you're not alone in this. We're all in it together." Mari gave him a small nod, grateful for his support, but a part of her still felt so far away from him, from everything. She had never imagined it would come to this, fighting not just for what she believed was hers, but for her identity. The Mari who had once shared everything with Nathaniel, who had been a partner, a wife, a force in her own right, she was fighting to reclaim that person, that sense of self, from a world that seemed intent on erasing her. The courtroom was filled with the sound of the judge's gavel, the murmur of voices and the rustling of papers, but Mari felt detached from it all. Her mind was with the evidence, with the stakes that were rising higher with every passing day. Isabel had explained the complexity of the case. They were challenging the legitimacy of the will, arguing that Sierra's actions had been unduly influenced, that Nathaniel had been manipulated into making decisions that were not in line with his true wishes. Isabel presented the first round of evidence calmly, methodically. She outlined the emails, the documents, the testimonies from Vivian, and the unsigned addendum. The defense, representing Sierra, countered with her usual poise, dismissing the allegations as misunderstandings, as if they were trivial disputes rather than a systematic attempt to undermine Nathaniel's wishes. As the days wore on, Mari found herself in the midst of a whirlwind of legal strategy. There were moments when she felt like an observer in her own life, watching Jameson and Isabel fight on her behalf, but all the while, a quiet voice inside her urged her to fight back herself, to take the reins, to stop being the victim of this legal battle. She wasn't just a passive recipient of justice. She was the one who had been wronged, and she needed to reclaim her narrative. But how much of this was truly about justice? How much was about reclaiming what had been taken from her piece by piece until she didn't recognize herself anymore? One afternoon, as the proceedings stretched on, Mari found herself standing in front of a mirror in the courthouse bathroom, looking at her reflection with tired eyes. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She had spent so many months, so many years, focusing on Nathaniel, on their life together, that she had lost sight of who she was beyond their partnership. But now, as the legal battle unfolded, she realized something vital. This fight wasn't just for the truth of Nathaniel's will. It was for her own sense of self. She was no longer just fighting for what she had lost. She was fighting for who she had once been and who she was becoming. Mari took a deep breath, her reflection staring back at her with newfound clarity. The fear of what might come next, of facing the truth, of confronting Sierra, still loomed large, but it wasn't overwhelming anymore. She wasn't just reacting to what had been done to her. She was stepping forward, taking control. Back in the courtroom, the next round of proceedings began. As Jameson and Isabel presented their final arguments, Mari sat up straighter, her mind focused. She could feel the shift within her, the quiet but powerful decision to reclaim her place in this narrative, to stop being the one who was erased. Her internal conflict between revenge and closure still pulsed beneath the surface. But as the gavel came down, she knew what she had to do. This wasn't just about winning the case. It was about finding peace with the past and reclaiming her future. The legal battle, as exhausting and painful as it had been, had taught her something crucial. Justice wasn't just something she sought from the outside world. It was something she had to give herself. She looked at Jameson and Isabel, their faces focused and determined. She wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they would take down the lies, expose Sierra's manipulation, and reclaim what was rightfully hers. The case wasn't just about Nathaniel anymore. It was about her voice, her story, her future, and Mari was ready to make sure the world knew it. The courtroom was still, the tension hanging thick in the air. Mari sat quietly in her seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes were fixed on the judge, who sat at the front of the room, his gavel in hand. She could feel the weight of the last several weeks pressing on her shoulders. The long hours spent reviewing documents, the constant legal battles, and the emotional roller coaster that had brought her to this moment. But now, as the judge prepared to render his decision, she felt something different. The crushing anxiety that had defined so much of the process had started to ebb away. She wasn't just waiting for a verdict anymore. She was standing at the precipice of something much larger. Isabel had presented the case with meticulous precision. The evidence of Sierra's manipulation, the forged documents, and Vivian's testimony all lining up perfectly. Jameson had been unwavering in his support, pushing forward with every legal maneuver, every opportunity to turn the tide in their favor. And now it had all come down to this one moment. The judge cleared his throat, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the room. After reviewing all presented evidence, including the documents submitted and the testimonies provided, this court has decided to temporarily halt the distribution of Nathaniel Dawson's estate until further investigation can be made into the legitimacy of the changes made to his will and trust. Effective immediately, the estate's proceedings are paused. Mari's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. She had expected some form of delay, some formal announcement of further proceedings, but to hear the words halted, it was more than she could have hoped for. The court had recognized the irregularities. The injustice had been acknowledged. The momentum was shifting, the judge continued, his words steady, but carrying the finality of a pivotal decision. In light of the evidence presented, including concerns regarding undue influence, the court will take the necessary time to fully review all legal documents before allowing any further action regarding the estate's distribution. Mari exhaled, her breath coming out in a quiet rush. She felt the knot in her stomach loosen, but it wasn't just relief. It was a sense of empowerment that she hadn't realized she needed until now. For the first time in months, the chaos, the grief, the sense of being erased, everything seemed to settle. There was a path forward. A path where she could reclaim Nathaniel's legacy, a path where she had a voice again. Sierra's face was unreadable, but Mari could see the flash of panic behind her controlled expression. The woman who had maneuvered so carefully, who had fought to take everything, now found herself on the defensive. The weight of the court's decision was more than just a setback for Sierra. It was a blow to the power she had worked so hard to amass. As the judge concluded the hearing, Mari caught sight of Sierra standing up, her back straight, her jaw clenched. She had been forced to step down, forced to cede control, if only temporarily. The power dynamic had shifted. Mari could feel the quiet satisfaction settle over her. She wasn't done yet. The case wasn't over. But this victory, the court's decision to pause the proceedings, was a monumental step in the right direction. It wasn't just about winning the estate. It was about winning back her life. She stood up slowly, her legs steady beneath her as the realization washed over her like a wave. Nathaniel's legacy was still hers to reclaim. She wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting to restore her own place in the narrative, to reclaim the history that Sierra had tried so hard to erase. The walk out of the courtroom felt different. The air no longer felt heavy with doubt and fear. It felt lighter, filled with possibility. As they made their way down the hallway, Mari found herself walking with a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just reclaiming Nathaniel's legacy. She was reclaiming her voice, her identity, her sense of self that had been swallowed by the manipulations of the past months. Jameson walked beside her, his eyes glancing over to her with a quiet approval, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The decision spoke for itself. Mari had taken back control, not just of the estate, but of her life. Isabel was close behind, nodding in satisfaction. "This is just the beginning, Mari. But today, we've made a stand. Today, the power shifts." Mari nodded, the weight of the decision and the path ahead still fresh in her mind. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She wasn't the widow who had been left behind. She was the woman who had fought for what was rightfully hers. She had stood up for herself, for Nathaniel, and for their shared legacy. And as they stepped into the bright daylight outside the courthouse, Mari knew one thing for sure. She was no longer a victim of circumstance. She was the author of her own story, and this was only the beginning. The chaos of the past months, the legal battle, the betrayal, the overwhelming grief seemed distant now, though not forgotten. She had fought for so much more than a will or an estate. She had fought for herself, for her place in the story. And as she stepped further into the foundation, Mari realized that she was no longer the woman who had once felt erased, left behind in the shadow of Nathaniel's death. She had reclaimed her own voice, her own identity, and in doing so, had found a peace that had eluded her for so long. Jameson and Isabel walked in beside her, their presence a reminder of the unwavering support they had given her. But this moment, this return to the foundation, was hers alone. She made her way to Nathaniel's old office, the room that had once been a shared space of dreams and plans. The desk was still there, though now it was clean, ready for the next person to take it over. The shelves that lined the walls, filled with books and records of the foundation's work, had remained untouched, like a monument to everything Nathaniel had believed in. But as Mari stood there, looking at the space that had been a part of her life for so long, she knew something had shifted. Nathaniel's legacy wasn't just about his work. It was about the future they had envisioned together, and that future was still hers to shape. The door to the office opened, and a new face stepped in. Meg Carter, the new head of the Foundation's leadership team. Meg was a sharp, confident woman in her early 40s, with an energy that matched Nathaniel's vision for the future. She extended her hand with a smile, her professionalism evident. But Mari could see the glint of recognition in her eyes as they shook hands. "I've heard so much about you." "Mari," Meg said, her tone warm but respectful. "I've seen the work you and Nathaniel did here, and I'm honored to carry that forward. But I also know this is your legacy. Your vision is just as important as his." Mari smiled, the weight of those words sinking in. For so long, she had felt like an outsider in her own life. But now she realized that this was still her foundation, her work, her purpose. She wasn't just here to support Nathaniel's vision. She was here to preserve it and to build upon it. "I want to make sure that Nathaniel's work continues," Mari said, her voice steady. "But I also want to make sure that we evolve, that we adapt to the world as it is now. There are people we can help, causes we can support, but we can't forget the values that Nathaniel and I built this foundation on." Meg nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I couldn't agree more. And I want you to know, Mari, that I'm here to work with you. I'm not here to replace you or Nathaniel. I'm here to help carry the torch forward." As they sat down to discuss the future of the foundation, Mari felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had spent so many months lost in the turbulence of legal battles, betrayal, and grief. But now, as she spoke with Meg, as she planned the future of the foundation with clear intentions and a steady heart, Mari realized how far she had come. She had transformed from a woman who had been pushed aside, erased from the narrative, to a woman who had reclaimed her place in the world. She wasn't just a passive observer anymore. She was an active force, shaping her own story, her own legacy, and the future of the foundation that had meant so much to both her and Nathaniel. Marie's journey had been one of pain and loss, but it had also been one of strength and transformation. The woman who had once felt invisible was now standing firm in her own light. And as she looked around the office, the place that had always been a symbol of their shared vision, Mari felt a quiet, powerful satisfaction. She was no longer alone. She was standing where she belonged, not just as Nathaniel's widow, but as a force in her own right. And as she worked alongside Meg and the new leadership, Mari knew that the foundation would not just survive, it would thrive. It would carry on Nathaniel's legacy, but it would also carry hers. This was her time, her story, and for the first time in a long time, Mari felt like she was finally living it.